Arnold's transition to Hollywood was not an accident or a stroke of luck. It was a military campaign. In this chapter, we analyze how Schwarzenegger transferred his methods of psychological suppression from the bodybuilding stage to movie sets. He understood that in the film industry, being talented wasn't enough. You had to be indispensable and dangerous. We break down his tactics for eliminating rivals in the struggle for roles. Arnold didn't just choose scripts, he systematically destroyed the image of anyone who could compete with him in the action genre. We will address the subject of his extremely harsh treatment of colleagues and staff. There are numerous accounts of his behavior on set that bordered on tyranny. He used his physical superiority and star status to dictate terms that often humiliated other participants in the process. We will also examine his financial pragmatism. Arnold was one of the first actors to turn himself into a corporation, ruthlessly protecting his interests. Particular focus will be placed on his ability to rewrite history. He hired the best publicists to suppress scandals related to his past and behavior. This was the process of creating a clean hero for family viewing, while broken careers and people who dared to cross him remained backstage. We will see how Arnold learned to manipulate the press as virtuously as he manipulated weights in the gym. The world knows Arnold Schwarzenegger as the embodiment of the American dream, a man who came from a small Austrian village to conquer Hollywood, sports, and politics. However, behind that dazzling smile lies something far more complex and darker. Arnold was never just an athlete. He was a strategist who viewed the people around him not as friends or colleagues, but as tools or obstacles on his path to absolute dominance. In this chapter, we break down the early stages of his journey. We examine how his character was forged in the conditions of post-war Austria and the harsh upbringing of his father. It was then that the idea was born in him that the world is divided into predators and prey. We analyze his first steps in Europe and how he used people to secure a one-way ticket to America. This is the story of a man who decided to become a god in a world where there is no room for weakness or sentimentality. We will focus on his early interviews, which were later carefully scrubbed by his PR team. In them, Arnold openly admired dictators and spoke of the need for a strong hand. We will attempt to understand, was this image part of his psychological game, or was it his true essence that he later learned to masterfully hide behind the mask of a friendly giant? This is the beginning of a legend's deconstruction.
Bodybuilding in the 70s is often called the golden era, a time of brotherhood and pure aesthetics. But if we look deeper behind the scenes, we see a different picture. Arnold turned the sport into a field of psychological warfare. He was a master of manipulation who began destroying his rivals long before they stepped onto the stage. We will break down his specific methods, from small humiliations in the locker room to direct misinformation of his competitors. Special attention will be paid to his relationships with Sergio Oliva and Lou Ferrigno. We will analyze episodes where Arnold used gaslighting and psychological traps to strip his rivals of their confidence. He didn't just want to be physically better, he wanted to see another man's will break. For him, victory was incomplete if the opponent was not morally destroyed. This raises questions about sports ethics and where the line is drawn between competitive spirit and sociopathic behavior. We will also touch upon his relationship with his best friend, Franco Columbu. Despite their apparent friendship, Arnold repeatedly used Franco to achieve his goals, often leaving him in the shadow. We will study the mechanics of their interaction and how Schwarzenegger built a hierarchy around himself. This chapter is a technical analysis of how intelligence and a lack of empathy can become a more powerful weapon than muscle mass. When Arnold decided to enter politics, he utilized his most powerful asset, a decades-long accumulation of manipulation. In this chapter, we break down the dark side of his governorship in California. This will not be a story about reforms, it will be a story about power as the ultimate drug. We analyze how he used populism and his media power to suppress opposition. His campaign was built on aggression, which he masked as decisiveness. We will examine the scandals that surfaced during his election race, allegations of misconduct that were suppressed by immense money and influence. How did a man with such a background manage to convince millions? The answer lies in his capacity for absolute control over information. We will also analyze his political betrayals, how easily he discarded allies when they ceased to be useful for his approval ratings. For Arnold, politics became the highest form of bodybuilding. He wanted to pump up his influence to the limit. We will see how his methods, gaslighting, public mockery of opponents, and backroom deals became the foundation of his rule. This is the story of how the Machiavellianism of an Austrian immigrant found its perfect embodiment in the halls of power.
Arnold's greatest victory lay in creating the image of the perfect family man, integrated into American aristocracy through the Kennedy clan. However, behind the doors of his estate, lies hidden for decades eventually destroyed this flawless facade. In this chapter, we analyze his ability to lead a double life. This is not just a story of infidelity, it is a study of how a person with the psychology of a dominator perceives loyalty and commitment. We will break down the story of his illegitimate son with the housekeeper who lived under the same roof as his official family. For any other public figure, this would have been the end of their career, but Arnold maintained control of the situation for years using the same methods of suppression and secrecy he used in sports. We examine how his pragmatism allowed him to look his wife and children in the eye while knowing the truth. This raises questions about the depth of his empathy and whether he ever viewed his loved ones as anything more than part of his winner image. The collapse of his marriage to Maria Shriver was the moment the world finally saw the cracks in the Terminator's armor. We analyze his reaction to the exposure. It was not remorse in the classical sense, but an attempt to minimize reputational damage. For Arnold, people were always resources, and when a resource stopped working for his image, he simply moved on to the next phase of his life. In the conclusion of our investigation, we must ask the main question: was the victory worth the price? Arnold Schwarzenegger achieved everything he wanted. He became the most famous bodybuilder, the highest paid movie star, and a powerful politician. But looking back, we see a path paved with psychologically broken rivals, deceived allies, and a betrayed family. His greatness is the result of a conscious rejection of common human morality in favor of efficiency. We summarize his Machiavellian philosophy. Arnold proved that the world can indeed be bent to one's will if one has enough will and a cold enough heart. His legacy is not just muscles or movies, it is a textbook on seizing power in any field. But at the end of the road, this titan remains alone with his greatness. We see a man who learned to control everything except time and his own past, which caught up with him nonetheless. Arnold is a warning. He is a symbol of what happens when ambition becomes the only measure of human value. We conclude this analysis with the thought, you can become the king of the world if you act like Schwarzenegger, but be prepared for the fact that at the top of that world, you will be the loneliest person. This was the story of the dark side of the Austrian oak, who grew too large to notice those he crushed with his roots.